Welcome to BizTech's C-Suite Conversation Show. Today we feature John Butler, the Managing Director, Asia Pacific and Middle East at LineSight. Now, founded in 1974, LineSight is a globally successful cost and project management consultancy in the construction industry. Now, to tell us more, welcome to the show, John.
Good morning, Brian. Nice to meet you.
Now, John, for a start, could you give us an overview of LineSight and its history?
Yeah, it's a kind of interesting history, and I've been part of that history. As I've been with the business since 1999, so 20 plus years. I've seen obviously significant growth over the years, but essentially, as you mentioned, we're a global consultancy business operating in the construction sector, very much focusing on project controls. That's project management, cost management, scheduling, and advisory. We've just under 1,300 employees across 26 offices. So that kind of gives us, really good global coverage from the west coast of the US all the way down as far as Australia. Some of the key sectors, Brian, that we operate in is kind of, we call core sectors and non-core sectors, but our core sectors include data centers, life sciences, and advanced high tech. And then some other non-core sectors would include things like hospitality, education, and healthcare.
Now, I want to, since you've been in this business with LineSight since 1999, could you then set the stage in terms of unpack for us how the industry has actually evolved since then, over the last 30 years? Yeah, it's
been a great journey in the industry, and maybe as our conversation continues, I think the industry has to evolve a little bit more, but the industry has made great strides with regards to the type of construction that's happening out there, with regards to off-site manufacturing. We talk about things called DFMA, which is kind of design, fabricate, manufacture, and assembly. I know it's a long word, but it's essentially trying to industrialize the construction sector as we progress. And then you've seen kind of sectors change and demands change. And I mentioned one of our key sectors is data centers. So if you go back to 1999, there wasn't too many data centers that we would call true data centers today, and that's been a real advancement with regards to that kind of what customers need and what businesses needs. And then look at healthcare space with regards to life science projects, and then we touch on kind of semiconductor space. So there's been so many movements in the market since kind of my early days, where I was probably much more exposed to things like what we would see as much more like shopping centers, commercial use, healthcare projects, which are still there, but the other sectors, in my opinion, have probably gone a little bit further and been a little bit more dynamic in how they've changed.
Now, here's the evolution in a nutshell. I think we want to start. You have the Middle East as one of your remit, and then APAC. And I want to zoom in on the Middle East because I think that if you break it down, we've really now in the third wave. We had this huge boom initially with Dubai and the construction and growth around that. Then we had the Qatar boom just before the World Cup and so forth. Now we have the Saudi Arabian boom. Walk us through that, because obviously LineSight has been very much part of that, which many of your customers are in the Middle East.
Yeah, we have. On the Middle East, I have a team. We have a team in the Middle East. You're right. It has been a relatively volatile market. We talk about kind of the ebb and flow of market, historically driven by the oil price, and obviously then with regards to something like the UAE trying to, and most recently with regards to Saudi Arabia, looking at the future and how does their economy work with regards to oil in the future. So we've had some kind of cyclical events in that, so driven again different kind of sectors. So you've had a big kind of residential boom trying to bring and increase the population in the UAE over the years. That kind of drops off a little bit. You've then had the World Cup boom, as I call it. I'm an avid soccer fan, so I was happy to see that tournament on TV. And then most recently, which I think is really interesting, is Saudi Arabia. And that to me, if you look at some of what we would call giga projects, and you look at something like NEOM, which is essentially the size of Belgium, that you're creating a new city, a new country, sort of within a country, looking at a diversification away from oil and future-proofing Saudi Arabia as a new economy with regards to tourism and other sectors that will support itself should the oil price drop in the future. So again, we as a business set up in the Middle East back in 2008, and we, like the rest of the economies there, have kind of ebbed and flowed with regards to projects, being extremely busy and then kind of tailing off a little bit as the oil price drops, and then becoming super busy again. So we're currently in a boom in Saudi Arabia and the rest of the UAE. And again, if you look at some of the sectors that we have been most busy in, which is around the data centers, life sciences, and high tech, we are seeing actually a boom in those markets as well because of appetite for data, appetite for national resilience with regards to life sciences. So again, there's kind of subsectors outside of these more fancy kind of neon projects happening in the Middle East at the moment.
So in the Asia Pacific region as well, those are really the growth centers, isn't it, as well?
Yeah, we strategically kind of set back and looked at how could we as a business kind of grow in this region. And you know, it's a very Asia Pac has been a very competitive market. We as a business looked at our core sectors, which is again I've kind of mentioned that, which is anything to do with kind of tech space, and we've looked at how we can develop our business, aligning ourselves to our long-term customers, such as data center customers and life science customers, and follow those customers into established kind of tier one markets. And then obviously as the kind of dynamics in populations change and requirements, following them into tier two markets as well. So we've seen fantastic growth in Asia. And I think we're just at the start of that journey as well in lots of sectors. Yeah.
Now, John, one of the key things which you alluded to is with regard to industrialization of construction. Now, that's obviously very much linked to efficiency. It's also linked to sustainability. And obviously then technology plays a pivotal role in this. Tell us about how that has evolved in the Asia Pacific region.
Yeah, for sure. Actually, if you go back in time, and we were looking at this in the last couple of years, there's been quite a lot of papers with regards to the construction industry, actually, in comparison to other industries, has not progressed as far. So we haven't, the industrialization of the industry hasn't probably moved as much as others. I think COVID in some ways, while it was very negative to the industry, it will also help look at, you know, things like supply chain, labor resources, how more efficient can you be? The strive essentially is that where the market, I think, will go is that we will have more components or subcomponents of buildings delivered in a factory environment. So again, you can control the quality, the time, the speed, hopefully improve the cost efficiency of that building, and ultimately drive efficiencies and also safety on site as well. But to me, that journey is starting. If you then kind of tap into things like AI, so artificial intelligence, I think advanced analytics, and then what's becoming more and more prominent in buildings, particularly on site or before they get to site at the moment, is about VR or augmented reality. So again, looking at how the projects will develop, how you can get efficiency. So again, if the project's a complex project, how you can predetermine a future issue. So it's much easier, as we always say, to make some clicks with your mouse versus kind of knocking down bricks on site. So
yes,
that's kind of the analogy that you'll often hear in the industry. So again, I think that's a really fantastic kind of growth initiative. I think it has to happen. There's labor constraints all around the Asia Pacific region at the moment. So we need to think how we can drive efficiency in the sector.
So I want to drill down a little bit specifically around construction and building construction as a whole. So industrialized building systems have been around in the West for a long time, in developed markets, say in the region like Singapore. Singapore has been using this industrialized building systems for a long time. But adoption has been slower in the rest of ASEAN and in maybe some markets like India. Why has that been the case?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you need some either government support or the private industry support driving those behaviors, because initially the capital requirements is intensive to set up essentially a factory to build so if you look at different sectors, you look at the hospitality sector. So you'll often, if you're walking around the city, you'll often see bathroom pods, which are kind of prefabricated bathrooms, essentially being lifted into hotel rooms. So that's been around for a long time. If you look at then the more tech sector, so you look at data centers or life sciences, while the building components, the main frame and structure are not pre-made or modular, but most of the subcomponents behind that, so the big mechanical, electrical, and process systems are usually, the strive is to build them off-site in factory conditions, but that takes a lot. So you need kind of essentially like a manufacturing facility, and then you need to decide, how does that work? How do you actually get that from a manufacturing location onto a construction site and it's lifted and assembled safely as well. So there's some limitations on size of components and how you can actually do what we call the buildability aspect of it. So it's easy to build it on a factory, and then how do you actually get it to that particular site and put up there? But so
and there's a cost equation there, isn't it, as well?
Correct. And it goes back to maybe the sectors that we kind of strive in. If you compare that to others, if you're usually one of the tech or the life science or the semiconductors who have what we would see as long programs of works over a period of time, they can see that payback because they've got a long period of time over X number of years. They drive efficiencies which might take more capital up front, but the long-term gain is there. Where if you're maybe a one-off developer building maybe a commercial block or a hotel, it's very, very difficult to see that payoff because you might do one project 1 year and maybe not replicate that for a number of years. So the instant payback is not there, or your overall ROI would be difficult to achieve on that particular project. So that's kind of where you need, and Singapore has been excellent with regards to the Building Control Authority driving that kind of industrialization of the construction sector.
Now, where do you, from your LineSight lens, see opportunities and challenges in the construction sector in the Asia Pacific region?
Yeah, thankfully I'm pretty optimistic as a person, so I can see lots of opportunities for LineSight. Looking at the sectors that we operate in and focus on, it's not that we don't operate outside of those sectors, but we work hard to secure our position in those sectors. We look at kind of primary markets. So if you looked at in data centers or life sciences, you're looking at some of the big cities in Japan, kind of Hong Kong, Singapore, in Australia. There's a particular strategy and opportunity there. We also then, if you just kind of maybe concentrate on data centers, which have been that kind of spine across the Asia Pacific region, you're now looking at the secondary markets coming up. So again, we're looking at opportunities in those markets. You look at Malaysia, Thailand, and those markets again, who have been particularly quiet for a long number of years. But I would look, if you look at some of the data supporting Malaysia, for example, which is just our neighbor here in Singapore, that will become one of the biggest data center markets in the region, driven by how we live our lives with regards to applications such as TikTok, or companies such as AWS, which is in the public domain, about essentially building a cloud system in that country, which again will kind of take customers or businesses in Malaysia onto an enterprise solution going forward as well. So I believe as that grows, one, the appetite for data and how we live our lives. We mentioned things like AI in the life. I believe we're at the start of a journey, and if you look at the requirements for data and data centers, I think that if anything, it's actually going to increase in the next 3 to 5 years.
John, it's been a fascinating conversation. I've really learned a lot, and you've just given me quite a lot of insights. But before we leave, any final thoughts you'd like to leave the audience with?
I think the Asia Pacific region, for me, I'm very passionate. I've been here for kind of 15 years in region between Australia and Singapore. I think it's, for those looking maybe to expand into Asia and Asia Pacific, it's fantastic opportunities, and particularly in the construction sector, right across the various asset classes. And I think for the next, I believe, 10 plus years, there's some significant opportunities for both companies and individuals who want to come into the construction industry to have great careers.
Thank you very much, John, for coming on the show.
Thank you, Brian. Thanks for your time.
We've been speaking to John Butler. He's the Managing Director, Asia Pacific and the Middle East at LineSight. I'm Brian Fernandez, and you've been watching and listening to BizTech's C-Suite Conversation Show. This interview will be on our website, www.biztech.asia, as well as our syndication partners, TV stations, radio stations, and websites. Thanks a lot for tuning in.